We've got a fantastic author and historian, NHL author and historian with us, Mike Commito, because he had a fantastic Bruins 365 release on Tuesday. Mike, how are you? Thank you so much for coming to hang with us here on the Hub.
Doing well. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Psyched to have you. Psyched to pick your brain, because I was kind of teasing you a little bit before we brought you into the show about where your fandom lies, but the credibility, the people that spoke to the well put together book that you have and how you just kind of reach into the hearts of the Bruins fan base. The easiest question to ask is, like, where is your point of your starting point? How do you begin a book like this with the extensive research and just kind of connecting the hearts of Bruins fans?
Yeah, well, again, I've been upfront that I obviously don't necessarily bleed black and blue, or black and gold. Sorry, I mean, there's my Leaf fan coming out right now.
There you go. It's not
mentioned the blue. I come by it honestly. I'll say that. But to be honest, I picked the Bruins because I had already done, the Canadians. I'd done the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I live in Sudbury, Ontario, which is home to a number of players who had come through the Bruins ranks. Jerry Topozini is one, and it's actually where I'm launching the book in Sudbury after he had spent his time with the Bruins, in the 50s and 60s. He came back to Sudbury. He coached for the Sudbury Wolves, but he also established a bar here that really became like a cultural, a hub for our community. They've done a lot of great work for fundraising minor hockey here. And so I think I had always had a little bit of the Bruins in my heart by being in Sudbury, and more recent players like Nick Foligno and Tyler Bertuzzi come from where I come from. And so there was always that moment there. And of course, given the fact that there's such a storied franchise going back to 1924, like I had known a lot about the team's history. And then, of course, being a Leafs fan, which I've already alluded to, I know about those moments in, 2013, 2018, 2019, 2024. You can stop me at any time. But I'm familiar with those moments. And, of course, some of the greatest players in the game's history, have come through the Bruins. And so I think I had those pieces there. But for me, as a historian, regardless of what my allegiances are, I knew that I wanted to do my research. I wanted to read as much as I could. And I really wanted to try to get to know a lot of the players who may not have been household names for me, simply because I hadn't cheered for the team. But I think it was still important that, I did my homework and that I was true to the franchise. Again, I think what I'd learned with previous books is that no one really wants to read a Bruins book from the perspective of a Leafs fan. So I tried to check all my baggage at the door and ensure that I was being true to the franchise. Although I will say that there's definitely a few stories where you see my perspective come through. But I think certainly Bruins fans will appreciate that, because I haven't had the chance to be on the opposite side of that history just yet.
Listen, anyone who pretends they don't have an allegiance somewhere and it works in the sports world is lying, okay? Because we all got into this because we were fans of something at some point, right? And maybe things change and some people become more neutral, but whatever. You were born and raised a Leafs fan, and that's how you got into it. And like you said, there's so many moments that cross over with the history. So I love, that explanation, number one. And number two, as a professional historian, yeah, you said you do your research, you check things at the door, and it's nice to offer a different perspective from let's say someone who was a Bruins fan through and through. Like, you get to see it from like a different angle. So I'm just gonna get that out of the way, and I think I appreciate the work that you've done and the history and the research, because that's what's really important. It's about the history of this 365 days. But what are some of your favorite, or maybe if you want to pick one or a couple, do you have any favorite stories that relate to Bruins history? And they're probably not the ones that involve the Leafs, but any favorite ones that you can pick out of your mind right now?
Well, I mean, there was earlier this week, obviously, we had Marchand return to the Garden. And what I'd realized that I obviously didn't realize when I was writing the book, because obviously we hadn't had the schedule yet, but like that was exactly 16 years after he made his NHL debut for the Bruins. And so I had the story in the book about him making playing his first game. But what I decided to do, which again, I think, Sophia, is where I bring in a different perspective that, somebody who's not me may not have, because, I'll reveal this in a second, but rather than focusing on what Marchand did that night back in 2009, when the Bruins hosted the Predators, he had an assist, he was +1, he played 14 minutes, great. And we know that he obviously had a great career after that. That game in itself maybe, wasn't as interesting, but what I wanted to do with that story was I talked about a couple years into his NHL journey, a couple of my buddies ran into him in Toronto after the Leafs had played the Bruins. And what I was trying to do with that story was showcase like how much of a legend Brad Marchand was already in Canada to people who weren't even Bruins fans. Like my two buddies that ran into him, one is an Avalanche fan and he hates the Leafs. And the other one is a Columbus Blue Jackets fan, but they loved Brad Marchand because of what he did at the World Juniors. And my one friend was so excited to see Brad Marchand that he completely, I think, brushed off Tyler Seguin, who was also outside on the road at this time. And my other friend was kind of running interference and apologizing to Seguin because Seguin was very, I think, complimentary and wanted to introduce himself to my friend, but my friend did not care because all he wanted to do was shake Brad Marchand's hand and talk to him about the game, but more importantly, talk to him about the World Juniors. So I love being able to kind of pull, I think, some of those stories in. I think certainly that's a unique experience that was relayed to me by my friends, but I think it also does speak to, the caliber of player that Marchand was, what he meant to fans, beyond the Bruins, what he's meant to Canada, obviously with what he's done internationally. So, I mean, stories like that where I think I'm able to take the research that I've obviously done, but I think inject some of my own experiences and my own perspective to give you something a little bit different. Because I think you could obviously read a great write-up about Marchand's first game in 2009, but what can we do that's a little bit different that might, give you a different, different way of viewing that?
I love learning about the interactions that take place because I feel like it just kind of helps with different creative angles, which kind of leads me to like, who are some of the people that you spoke with to kind of piece together these stories for Bruins 365?
So with these books, it's interesting because the stories they're quite short. So there's 365 of them, one for every day of the year, and they're really only about 175 words each. So you don't necessarily have to speak to a lot of people to get interviews. I think interviews are obviously great because they give you that different perspective that you may not get from reading an old game sheet or going through YouTube highlights. So I had done some interviews in the past that I was able to pull into the book. Nick Foligno was one guy that I interviewed, not for the book, but in previous stories, because, when Nick joined the Bruins, I was very excited because, he calls Sudbury home in the summertime and his family comes back here in the offseason. So I thought, if the Leafs aren't going to win the Cup, I definitely want the Bruins to win the Cup because if they win, Nick will bring the Cup back to Sudbury and that would be great for the community to be able to celebrate him and obviously celebrate, the mug coming back to Sudbury. And I did a story on that and, I might have jinxed them because I had already got ahead to what it would be like if Nick and the Bruins did win that year. I talked to Anthony Topazzini, the owner of the Beef and Bird, whose father, Jerry, had played for the Bruins. And he said that if Nick, came back to Sudbury with the Cup and he brought the Cup to the Beef and Bird, he would give him free porchetta for life, which is, Italian roasted pork. The Beef and Bird does this whole tradition where they play porchetta bingos on Saturdays. It's really a Sudbury thing. You'd have to experience it to really believe it and understand what it is. But it is a really big deal here. And so to get porchetta for life, obviously the Stanley Cup is one thing, but porchetta for life is a whole other thing. So I guess I'm probably most upset that maybe I inadvertently jinxed Nick's opportunity to get that porchetta for life because I think that's something that he would cherish forever. But talking to guys like Nick, that obviously getting his perspective, you see a bit of that in the book. And then certainly talking to Anthony Topazzini, hearing about his father. I have a lot of stories about Jerry there because he is a bit of an underrated player just by virtue of the fact that he played, in an era where I think a lot of Bruins fans, may have forgotten what he contributed to the team.
That's a great story. Porchetta for life is not something you get offered every day. So,
No.
So sad, too bad, I guess.
Yeah.
Listen, I have a quick question pivoting here, but obviously, Brad Marchand came back to play recently with the Florida Panthers, first time back. I have a love-and-hate relationship with the internet. Things can go viral so quickly, but then often the person who started the, who said the thing, and I'm going to bring it up in a second, it's like gets lost in the shuffle. But everyone, including us on the broadcast and then on the ESPN broadcast, everyone was talking about how can we believe that to the day that Brad Marchand first played at the Garden, he's back. Was that you? Was that because of your book that people knew that? Because I don't know who started that, but somehow it got out on the internet. And I was like, how did we find this information?
So that day, I do daily hockey history tweets on Twitter or X, whatever we want to call it these days, and I knew that it was going to be his anniversary of his first game because that's the story I had in the book, and I knew that I wanted to share that it was exactly 16 years later that he was going to make his debut, and I think I put out my tweet in the morning about on this day in 2009, Brad Marchand made his NHL debut, and then the Bleacher Report on Ice account I think made the connection that he was, of course, playing in Boston that night. They put something out, gave me a little stick tap for that. And then I think that was really started making the rounds. And then obviously you saw it throughout the day. But yeah, that was kind of the night before. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Like the odds of this happening. Obviously the hockey gods have a sense of humor because what are the odds that exactly to the day? And, you know, again, it would have been one thing where he made his NHL debut on the road in Nashville. You know, that's great. But like he made it his debut at home. He's coming home. We knew it was going to be a really emotional return. Obviously, last year he was injured. He wasn't able to be a part of that first trip back. And then everything with the buildup, like you just knew that it was going to be a special night. So I think certainly given the circumstances around, you know, his return, I think that those tweets and however they were shared, I think there was a lot of legs that day just because I think everyone was so excited about that. And certainly I don't think it disappointed. I think maybe obviously on the score sheet it disappointed, but certainly I think the ceremony, the tribute to him, I think lived up to its billing.
Yeah, sports are nothing if not poetic.
Sorry, Kasey, I just wanted to say, give you credit where credit is due, because we used that on the show a million times and didn't know where it started. So, Mike, thank you for that, and you deserve the credit for putting that out there.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people had it too, but thank you. I'm just again, it was just worked out very well.
Yes, it did. Well, before we let you go, we got to know what you're working on next, and if it will be another Original Six team getting into the mix.
So it's I'm taking a little bit of a break from the 365 series. I think we can obviously continue to round out the original six. You can go, you know, obviously there's three more, and then of course there's still 29 teams total left that I could do. So I could be doing this, you know, until I'm old and gray. I am working on another book project right now. It is a little bit different. I can't share all the details yet, but I'm really excited about that. It's still going to be in hockey. But it's going to be a wildly different format from this. It will definitely feature at least one former Bruin in the book in a big goal that he scored against the Leafs in 2013. So I'll leave it at that, but I think you can probably start to piece together a little bit of what that might entail.
All right, so more Bruins and Maple Leafs, love or lack thereof. We will actually have to stand by for the book release. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Everyone, make sure that you are following Mike on X, Twitter, whatever you prefer to call it, so that you stay on top of all of the historic news as well as book releases. And every day, actually, you do post fantastic events that took place in the NHL on this day, guys that scored and more memorable moments throughout the NHL. Mike, again, I hope that we have you back very soon to tease more on the upcoming book.
Absolutely. Happy to be back anytime.